If you've been watching the world's militaries over the last decade, you've probably noticed a quiet shift happening inside NATO, one that almost snuck by without headlines or dramatic announcements. It's the kind of shift you only appreciate when you zoom out and look at the alliance as a whole. 14 of the 32 NATO nations have either bought the F-35 or formally committed to flying it. And when you consider how fiercely controversial this aircraft used to be back in 2015, the transformation is striking. Somehow, this jet, expensive, slow in development, loaded with critics, has become the face of Western air power. Today, we're going to dig into why that happened, what NATO gains from this massive move toward a single aircraft, and why this decision, smart or not, comes with risks that should make every defense planner sit up straight. This isn't a fanboy pitch about stealth fighters. It's a closer look at how an alliance built on diversity is turning itself into something far more standardized, far more interconnected, and maybe far more vulnerable than anyone expected. At the center of the whole story is survivability, something painfully clear in every modern conflict. Against a real integrated air defense network, not some pickup truck insurgent threat armed with stingers, fourth-generation fighters like the F-16 or the Eurofighter Typhoon just don't get close enough. The technology that defined the late Cold War no longer buys you the invisibility or awareness you need. It's not that those jets suddenly became bad, they simply weren't designed for the world we're in now. Let's build a simple picture without getting bogged down in math textbooks. Imagine an American F-15 carrying AGM-158 JASSMs, missiles with an estimated reach of 575 miles. Across the battle space, a Russian S-400 battery sits with its 250-mile engagement envelope. On paper, the math looks easy. 575 is greater than 250. So the F-15 should be able to fire long before the S-400 sees anything. But missiles aren't psychic. They need coordinates. And the F-15's Sniper Advanced Targeting Pod can only work within line of sight, capped by physics and altitude. At roughly 50,000 feet, the absolute maximum theoretical line of sight against a curved Earth is around 274 miles. That's under ideal conditions, with no clouds, no terrain masking, nothing getting in the way. Real life rarely gives you ideal. Once you factor in mountains, weather, and the simple reality of atmospheric junk, the jet has to creep closer than anyone likes, into a zone the S-400 can reach. That's the problem NATO keeps running into. You can have long-range weapons, but you still need someone who can slip in, gather exact targeting information, and then pass that data to the shooters without being tracked or blown out of the sky. And that's where the F-35 changes the entire geometry of the fight. The jet's stealth isn't a magic cloak, but it's enough to let it operate passively, listening, watching, collecting signals, fusing them into a clear picture, and then passing that picture to anything else that needs it. It doesn't have to turn on its radar to be useful. It doesn't even have to fire a weapon. In the scenario above, the F-35 becomes the scout that keeps the F-15 safely outside the S-400's umbrella. This kind of coordination is what makes the aircraft more of a battlefield nerve center than just another fighter. And for several NATO nations, there's another piece of the puzzle, one with enormous political weight. The F-35A is the only aircraft currently certified to deliver the B-61 Tactical 12 nuclear gravity bomb. Germany, Italy, and the Netherlands all participate in NATO's nuclear sharing mission. Their deterrent credibility depends on the ability to deliver that bomb, and right now, the only aircraft that can perform that mission is the F-35A. Submarines offer another leg of the nuclear triad, of course. But air-delivered nuclear capability gives decision-makers flexibility and signaling power that missiles alone cannot provide. Another cornerstone is interoperability, a word that looks simple but represents decades of strategic effort. For generations, NATO has worked to make sure its forces could talk to one another, fight alongside one another, and share information across national boundaries. The F-35 takes that principle and turns it into something almost seamless. With its Link 16 network for broad communications and the stealthy multifunction advanced data link, MADL, for F-35 to F-35 whisper talk, the aircraft can pass imagery, targeting data, and threat information without giving off an electromagnetic signature that screams its location to enemy sensors. Picture this. A Dutch F-35 spots a threat deep in contested airspace, sends the coordinates through MADL, and an American F-15 or Polish F-16, armed with standoff weapons, launches from far outside danger. The shooter never had to cross into the risky zone. The F-35 becomes the eyes. The older jets become the fists. It's a natural evolution of combined arms, but in the air domain. NATO isn't just standardizing aircraft. It's standardizing logistics, training, and maintenance as well. Italy's Cameri plant assembles jets for multiple nations. The Netherlands operates a major sustainment hub and engine overhaul center. The UK remains a Tier 1 partner building major structural components. That industrial spread isn't accidental. It's political glue. It keeps everyone invested in the same hardware and the same mission, and it's one of the reasons nations continue buying in. But NATO isn't making this choice in a vacuum. The last 3 years of conflict and covert strikes have served as a blunt reminder. If you can be seen, you can be killed. In Ukraine, drones and artillery saturated the battlefield, revealing a simple truth. Survivability begins with invisibility. And during Israel's Operation Rising Lion, the F-35I Adir reportedly slipped into Iranian airspace for deep penetration ISR missions, passing target data back to the larger strike package. It may or may not have fired weapons in that instance, but even without pulling a trigger, it proved it could bypass advanced radars and deliver critical intelligence. NATO commanders noticed. And then, as with every modern video explaining complicated technology, there's a sponsor shout-out. That doesn't change the facts, though. The F-35 program has become the biggest multinational aircraft effort in history. A decade ago, nobody would have believed this was the direction NATO would take. In 2015, the F-35 was battered by criticism. Over budget, behind schedule, plagued by scrutiny both inside the Pentagon and across European capitals. If someone had predicted that by the mid-2020s, 14 NATO countries would not only adopt the jet, but actively shape their future air power around it, comment sections would have exploded, and probably for good reason. Back then, it wasn't obvious that the program would stabilize, mature, or deliver what it promised. But look at the numbers now. 14 NATO members have received jets or signed contracts to buy them. The United States, the United Kingdom, Italy, Norway, the Netherlands, Denmark, Belgium, Poland, Germany, Finland, Canada, the Czech Republic, Romania, and Greece. Each one came with its own political battles, its own procurement drama. Germany spent decades reliant on old Tornado aircraft for nuclear delivery until spiraling maintenance and age forced its hand. In 2022, Berlin finally committed to purchasing 35 F-35As to maintain its nuclear sharing obligations. The UK already flew the F-35B, but recently added the A variant, because the B model cannot carry the B-61 bomb. Canada wrestled with a lengthy political fight before signing its contract in 2023 for 88 aircraft. The Czech Republic announced plans for 24 jets. Romania declared intent to buy 32. Greece aims for 40, driven in part by its tense rivalry with Turkey. An ironic twist, considering Turkey once belonged to the program before being expelled over its purchase of Russian S-400 systems. And then there's Finland. Before even joining NATO, Helsinki selected the F-35 in 2021 under its HX program, recognizing that if it ever became part of the alliance, having a jet that speaks the same language would be an advantage. Now that Finland is officially in NATO, that decision looks prescient. This growing fleet is built on a massive industrial backbone spanning Europe. Cameri in Italy assembles jets for more than just Italian squadrons. The Netherlands is a major sustainment and engine overhaul center. The UK produces critical structural elements as a Tier 1 partner. Across the continent, pilots are training the same way, flying the same jet, and thinking about air combat with the same playbook. For decades, NATO was a patchwork quilt of fighters: Belgian, Danish, and Portuguese F-16s, German and Italian Tornadoes, French and Greek Mirage 2000s, Polish and Slovak MiG-29s. That diversity made the alliance resilient. If one airframe got grounded, others kept flying. Redundancy was built in by default. But those fleets are aging out. Many were never designed to survive around modern long-range SAMs or face adversaries equipped with real-time electronic warfare and multi-sensor fusion. The environment changed, and the aircraft didn't. So NATO made a choice: consolidate around a platform that can survive. And while that may be the logical move, it brings a shadow with it, one that we'll explore in depth in Part 2. Because the F-35 isn't just replacing fighters, it's replacing options. And anytime you put that much weight on a single program, you create a pressure point that can either hold the line or crack the whole foundation. But every consolidation comes with a cost, and NATO's rapid shift toward the F-35 is no exception. The jet may be the most capable aircraft the alliance has ever flown, but it also concentrates responsibility, risk, and vulnerability into one single program. And that's the part of the conversation a lot of people prefer to skip. Because once you standardize an entire generation of air power around a single platform, you eliminate backup plans. You remove the safety net that decades of mixed fleets naturally created. Let's talk about the simple reality first. The F-35 is impressive, but it is not invincible. The global fleet has logged more than 700,000 flight hours, which is substantial by any measure, and proof that this aircraft is not some theoretical, too futuristic to use project. It flies, it fights, it supports missions every day. But numbers like that don't magically erase the ongoing challenges. Start with the cost per flight hour. The latest GAO reports put it at $36,000, down from earlier years but still well above targets. For comparison, the F-16 sits closer to $27,000 per hour. Even for wealthy NATO members, that difference compounds quickly across squadrons, training cycles, and deployments. For smaller nations operating only a handful of jets, keeping them mission-ready becomes an economic balancing act. Then there's the readiness question, the one topic that keeps logistics officers awake at night. Many countries struggle to keep their mission-capable rates above 60%. The U.S. Marine Corps saw its F-35B variant dip as low as 51% last year. That isn't a minor inconvenience. When half your fleet is grounded, maintenance delays stack up like a traffic jam. One jet waiting on parts becomes 5. 5 become 10. Before long, the squadron looks fine on paper, but flies only a fraction of what it's supposed to. It's not that the F-35 is unusually fragile. It's that its maintenance ecosystem is incredibly complex, and the alliance is still learning how to manage it at scale. Which brings us to ODIN, the Operational Data Integrated Network, the sprawling logistics and predictive maintenance system meant to replace the notoriously flawed ALIS platform. ODIN was advertised as the solution that would bring everything together: spare parts, mission data, scheduling, diagnostics. And in theory, when it works, it's outstanding. But the rollout has been slow, bumpy, and filled with delays. A system designed to streamline operations can just as easily disrupt them when it goes down. And because NATO members depend on that same system, a glitch in one nation's logistics network can ripple outward in unpredictable ways. The same story appears on the software side. The Block 4 upgrade, promised as the major leap in the F-35's evolution, was expected in 2024. Now the estimate sits at 2027, and anyone familiar with major defense programs knows that dates have a habit of slipping further. Block 4 isn't a cosmetic update. It unlocks advanced threat recognition, new weapons, and critical sensor improvements. For European pilots flying near Russian or Chinese airspace, threat libraries matter. Outdated software isn't just inconvenient, it's dangerous. And then we arrive at the most uncomfortable truth in this whole topic: dependency. Every nation that buys the F-35 ties itself to the United States, not symbolically, but operationally. The U.S. manages the software, controls critical data pipelines, provides mission data programming, distributes spare parts, and approves upgrades. This isn't colonialism or coercion. It's simply the framework of the program. But frameworks have consequences. In a perfect world, Washington would never restrict updates or delay support. But we don't live in a perfect world. Administrations change. Foreign policy priorities shift. Budgets tighten. Even unintended problems, like a cyber attack on the F-35's data infrastructure or a software bug affecting multiple variants, could ground the entire multinational fleet overnight. We've seen similar grounding events with other aircraft like the Osprey, so it's not theoretical. And because the F-35 is replacing so many aircraft, NATO no longer has a wide bench of alternatives to lean on. In the past, if Tornadoes had a maintenance issue, F-16s or Mirage 2000s filled the gap. If MiG-29s needed inspections, someone else stepped in. Today, as fleets retire and lines shut down, the alliance's future rests heavily on this one jet. If the F-35 goes down, even temporarily, so does a large portion of NATO's immediate deterrent force. That's where critics focus most of their attention. One airframe becoming the cornerstone of too many missions. Air superiority, nuclear delivery, ISR, deep strike, electronic warfare, command and control relay. The F-35 carries all of it, and specialization matters. When you push a single aircraft to do everything, you magnify the consequences of any problem. Still, NATO hasn't embraced the F-35 out of laziness. The uncomfortable reality is that there's no real alternative today. The European Future Combat Air System is still early in development, years, maybe decades, from fielding a real jet. The Tempest GCAP initiative led by the UK, Italy, and Japan is promising, but also far from operational. Even America's own next-generation fighters, like the classified F-47 platforms, are experimental and shrouded in secrecy. So NATO is left with the one aircraft that already exists, already flies, and already works. Whether by design or circumstance, the alliance's collective future runs straight through the F-35 program. And we also have to consider what the F-35 actually does beyond slinging missiles. In many ways, it acts as a floating sensor web. It sees things first. It identifies patterns earlier. It fuses data that no fourth-generation jet can. During exercises, F-35s consistently detect targets for older platforms, letting Allied jets shoot without entering danger. They've flown surveillance and targeting roles in the Baltic, the Black Sea, and the Arctic. They've proven they can operate inside contested electronic warfare environments without losing situational awareness. But for all its strengths, acceptance across Europe has never been unanimous. France remains openly skeptical, preferring to maintain full sovereignty over its air power and pushing hard for FCAS. Spain and Germany, although Germany bought F-35s, still raise concerns about strategic dependency. These countries worry not about capability, but about autonomy. They don't want their entire air power infrastructure tied to a foreign government's decisions. And to be fair, you don't have to look hard to see why. Export rules, update permissions, training modules, those levers matter during crises. At the same time, the industrial integration that the F-35 brings has its benefits. Countries aren't just buying a jet, they're buying into a shared economic ecosystem. Camry's assembly lines, the Netherlands' sustainment center, the UK's structural component factories, they weave nations deeper into the alliance. Shared investment reinforces shared defense. It makes it harder for any one member, even the United States, to walk away from collective commitments. So as everyone argued online about whether the F-35 was overrated, too expensive, or a maintenance headache, NATO quietly made its choice. Capability outweighed discomfort. Survivability outweighed autonomy concerns. And now, the alliance stands at a crossroads where its future strength and its future vulnerability converge around the same machine. That's the paradox of modern air power. The jet that gives NATO its greatest edge also gives it its greatest potential weakness. A decade ago, nobody would have predicted that this aircraft would become the alliance's backbone. But today, whether critics like it or not, the F-35 is no longer a symbol of controversy. It's the foundation of NATO's deterrent strategy. And if that foundation cracks, even a little, the entire structure above it starts to shake. That's where we leave it. The F-35 is many things: innovative, flawed, essential, expensive, powerful. But above all, it is now unavoidable. The alliance has tied its future to this machine, and that decision will shape NATO's air power for decades to come. And like any good reporter, I'll leave you with this final thought. Sometimes the smartest move on the chessboard is also the riskiest. NATO made its move. Time will reveal whether it was brilliant or whether the bill comes due later. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to see more navycast-style military analysis, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support truly helps us keep these in-depth reports coming. Got a question about today's topic? Or is there another global military issue you want us to cover next? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. And while you're there, let us know where you're watching from. Thank you for being here with us today. May God bless you and your family with peace, wisdom, and protection.